How you doing? I'm going to show you how to change the O-ring on a 2012 Nissan Titan behind the filter. I found out my truck was leaking. I changed the oil, still didn't fix it. Found out that this is a common problem. This is the piece that you're going to need in order to fix it. Here's the part number. It's just a small O-ring. $6 for a 2012 Nissan Titan. From what I understand, you can get it anywhere. As far as the part's concerned, it's pretty cheap. First thing you're going to need to do is remove the skid plate. Extremely easy. All you need is a ratchet and remove the first 4 bolts. It comes off. I'm an amateur mechanic, so if I can do it, pretty much anybody can. As you can see here, once you take it off, just remove it. You can kind of see where the oil was leaking onto the pan itself. It was dripping through. That's how I kind of found out. Once you remove this part, there's the 4 bolts. You're going to want to do a normal oil change, removing the oil like you typically would in any oil change. There's my filter. And then as you can see underneath where it was dripping through, it's dripping from behind the oil filter. So you can see kind of behind where it was getting on everything. Even on the oil cooler itself, underneath where the filter connects, you can see the oil on everything. Wanted to be sure it wasn't one of the hoses that connects to the oil cooler, so I did take the time to clean everything off. You're also going to want to take the oil from the oil pan itself. So go ahead and just remove the drain plug. Let that bad boy just run out, just like you typically would with any other oil change. FYI, you're going to want to remove that little plug in the middle of that where you throw your oil in. Just heads up, I went ahead and left some of the mistakes that I did in this video just so that you could learn from mine and it'll make your experience a lot easier. This can actually be done within half an hour with the right tools. If you just avoid some of the pitfalls that I happen to run into. I've changed my oil plenty of times, but again, the right tools make a huge difference. Once you're done draining the oil there, you're going to want to take off the air filter itself, or the oil filter itself. Make sure you have something to catch some of the oil it's going to drain out. They have that nifty oil slide underneath. Makes it really easy just to take off the oil filter and drain the oil. There's the oil cooler. Once you have everything off, this is pretty much what you're going to be working with. Specifically that plug that's right in the middle. When I had everything off and all the oil was drained, I went ahead and just wiped everything down. Mainly because although you could see the oil coming from behind the oil cooler itself, I just wanted to be sure. Again, it was on some of the hoses, and I wasn't sure if any of them were cracked. I did visually inspect them, but just to be sure, I wiped everything down, because ultimately, once everything was done and clean, I'd be able to see where the oil was coming from if for any reason it continued to leak. because that was the initial problem. The oil was leaking. Didn't know where it was coming from until I looked online and I saw that this happens to be a common issue. I found out from a guy from Facebook in a group for Nissan Titan enthusiasts called exactly that, Nissan Titan enthusiasts. Really cool group. Everybody talks about what they do with their vehicles, and it's a nice way to get some information. A little tip I got from the parts manager from Nissan. He said when you get the part, make sure you don't stretch it out. From what I understand, people will try to put it on the wrong rivet on the outside instead of in the inside. I'll explain that later, but you just want to make sure you don't do that, otherwise it's going to continue to leak. So once that's done and everything's wiped down as clean as you could pretty much get it, considering that it is oil, you're going to want to take care of the middle piece on the oil cooler. It's that the round portion that the oil filter comes on, or actually screws onto. If you can see here, what I'm pointing to here is exactly what you need to take out. I had a deep socket wrench, or ratchet, a deep socket with a small ratchet. When I was talking about those pitfalls, this is one of them. Now, if you want to fast forward through this, you can, but I had a hell of a time trying to get this off. As you can see here, it didn't matter how. I mean, it was just, I needed the leverage. It was simple as that. There was no way in hell, unless I tried for hours and hours at a time, trying to get this bolt unlatched with this small ratchet. Luckily, I remembered that I had a tension wrench, or a tension wrench, and it's a lot bigger. It was able to pop it. As you can see, this is kind of the face of a defeated man because it was just a pain in the ass. Again, I just tried a couple of tricks to try to get the leverage from taking care of this. If again, you can fast forward through this part. This is mostly just some of the things that I was trying to make it work. But afterwards, I got my hands on that tension wrench. It was a lot easier. It only actually took one time once I had the right tool. I thought I might have stripped the piece. That's something you don't want to do. Just avoid it and get a tension wrench or a bigger ratchet. Just the fact is, it's going to be a lot easier, and you don't want to do anything that you can't come back from, because ultimately you'd have to buy the entire filter cooler system, and that's exactly what you're trying to avoid anyways. Again, with the right tools, bam, done. That loosened it up enough where I could just pull it out with my hands. Another pitfall. There is going to be some oil left over in that bad boy. I happen to have an oil pan and some cardboard, so ultimately I was pretty much covered, but it would have been nice to have something there ultimately so that I didn't have to mess around in oil later on. But something to keep in mind when you're doing yours. As you can see, I eventually got my hands on my oil because I already had put it aside, and I went ahead and put it there just in case for any reason it was going to come out, because I haven't actually taken out the bolt that goes in the middle completely yet, mainly because I wasn't sure if it was going to have a lot more oil than expected, so I just wanted to be sure. But once I took it out, it seemed like most of it already had come out. Just wiped down everything clean, and I'm going to go ahead and show you exactly what I was doing down here. This is what it's going to look like without the bolt in the middle. That bolt secures it to the rest of the truck, and then behind that bolt is the O-ring, this rubber O-ring that holds the oil from leaking everywhere. That's why you're having the problem. Now, I'm not an engineer, but it seems kind of silly that they would have that as the only thing keeping the oil from coming out. From what I understand, that it happens with the Titans and the Armadas. So if this is an issue you're having, not a bad idea to look into it. From what I understand, it's also described in detail in the books that they have for the trucks themselves that explain how to take care of the vehicle. Those are sold at pretty much any local vehicle store, like AutoZone or anything like that. Now what I'm pretty much doing is inspecting it because it's still connected to the two hoses that are on the side. I didn't want to have to detach those hoses for any reason, so I just kept on kind of flipping it over. I'm going to go ahead and show you here, which you can see it pretty easily. Still connected to the hoses, as you can see, dripping just a little bit of oil, but it's easily flipped right upside down. And if you can see here, that rubber O-ring is the issue. Now, from what I understand, it's made out of a certain material that wears, or once pressed on it expands and whatnot. The new ones that I showed you with the part number, which I'll list in the description, is made out of a different kind of chemical composite, which from what I understand is supposed to help a little, but at least we know how to take care of this, and it's not something where the dealership tells us you're paying $380 some odd dollars to fix, plus $95 in the hour that they'll charge you for manpower. I actually took it out and measured it up. You'll be able to see here. I just wanted to be sure, but it's spot on. Again, in the inside, there's like this small rivet that you want to put it inside, not on the outside, because if you stretch it out, from what the parts guy at Nissan told me, is that they'll mess it up. You'll either have to buy another one, or it's going to continue to leak and you're going to think that something's wrong. I went ahead and got some of the oil just like you typically would with your oil filter and just lubricated it a bit just to be sure. Again, cleaned everything up since I had it off already. Then there is just a small little latch, two little pieces that hold together almost like a female and male side. Pushed it on, held it together, threw that bolt back in. Was able to do most of it with my hands all the way in, went in well. I did, however, keep the bolt away from any dust, dirt, or grime, just to ensure that it doesn't get into the vehicle, considering that it's filtering the oil. Make sure it's sturdy, make sure it doesn't move, because it didn't move before you took out the bolt. Make sure everything's legit. Definitely something that you want to make sure you take care of. Everything thus far was hand tightened. Didn't go as far as making sure that it was so tight that you wouldn't be able to remove it again, but I did make sure it was nice and tight. This time I used the right tool, which took seconds just to tighten that bolt back up to normal. I did use a little bit of force putting it in, but again, this is the middle piece. Then I don't expect to have to take it off anytime soon, so I went ahead and tightened it nice and tight. At this point, you can put the new oil filter on. Again, just like all the other parts, took some of the oil and just lubricated the inside. Typically in an oil change, I've been told to do this anyways, so I figured it was something that I would just do with the rest of the parts, just to be sure that it helped with tightening it, loosening the bolts and whatnot. Anything that pretty much went into the application itself, or putting everything back together is what I mean. I just lubricated the parts. For some reason, while I was putting it on, it stopped halfway, which kind of concerned me, but ultimately all it was is that my hands were full of oil. And when I wiped them off, they still technically had oil on them, and I just couldn't get enough grip to put it all the way on. It kind of concerned me a bit at first, just because I wasn't sure exactly what was going on. I thought maybe for some reason I messed up the threads. That's not the case. If you have a towel, which I was using the whole time, you can see throughout the video, all I did was eventually just grab it, wipe my hands off, use it to get some grip. It went all the way on, almost all the way on, about 3/4 of the way, and then I just used a oil filter attachment that helps me when I do my oil, and it went right on. Maybe if I was wearing my Iron Man t-shirt instead of my old Disneyland Mickey Mouse t-shirt, I might have been able to screw it on all the way. But in any case, it was a shirt that I didn't mind getting messed up, so. Alright. Now that you got the oil filter on, I went back underneath. I already put the drain plug back in for the oil in the oil pan, but I had only hand tightened it at that point, so I went back underneath and tightened it completely. Again, I tightened it until it was hand tight. Still put some force into it a little bit, but ultimately that's about it. Once you make sure that those are checked and no oil is going to come out at this point, you can now begin to replace the oil. I used the Max Life 75,000 plus Valvoline synthetic blend, mainly because I'm roughly around 8,000 plus, and there was a sale on it. It came with a free oil filter at the time. But from what I understand, now that I'm over around 80,000 miles, I'm going to go ahead and start using that synthetic blend until ultimately I push to a full synthetic later on when I hit past 100K. I used 5W30, I believe. But I'll double check that for you and make sure that it's in the description. That way you'll know ultimately if for any reason you need to know. I didn't have a funnel, so what I did is just after I used the first bottle, just cut the end of the bottle of the first one with a razor blade and made my own funnel. If for any reason you don't have a funnel, it's an easy way to just get it done ASAP. I didn't want to have to mess around, so I did what I had to. If for any reason you don't know, a Nissan Titan takes 7 quarts of oil. That's a 5-gallon there you see, and then 2 extra quarts. After I was done with the oil change, I actually kept the skid plate off for around 48 hours. That's around 2 days. I think possibly even 3, just to be sure that I wasn't leaking. That's one of those times after you're done with all of this, you're going to want to have, okay, yeah, it was 5W30 about the oil. But you're going to want to clean everything, all the oil, all the drips off of everything, just to be sure. That's how you're going to ensure that you don't have any more leaks. I went ahead and did that and then drove around without a skid plate for about 2 to 3 days. Made sure that both at night when it got cold and during the day when it was a little warm, because I live in Arizona, that it's not leaking. And ultimately this took care of the problem. I mean, it cost me the 41 bucks roughly to take care of all the oil and the oil filter because it had that sale, and the $6 that it took to get the O-ring from the dealership itself, and it fixed the leak, which ultimately they said it would have took around $380 to get the whole thing taken care of. And as you can see here, I went ahead and just placed it underneath where you can see kind of the work done and started it up. We were good to go. It's been running strong ever since. After those 2 to 3 days, I put the skid plate back on, and I just saved myself about 400 bucks if you didn't really know what you're doing. And trust me when I say, anybody can do this. It was super easy. If you can do your own oil change, you can take care of this and save yourself some money. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it helps. If it did, leave me a comment, like it, share it if you need to, but take care of it.